Welcome to Paranormal M, where we explore the creepiest corners of the unknown. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay on top of our latest ghostly adventures. Prepare yourself for some eerie excitement. Kids and animals. My dad passed away the night before I began my senior year of college. I obviously missed the first week. I was never the same. I lost a friend, confidant, and advisor. It was so sudden and unexpected. 7 months later, my girlfriend and I learned that she was pregnant. One of the first things that she said to me was, "We're going to be okay. We're just bringing back a part of you that was lost." And this was wildly helpful and comforting since I was 22 and I never held a baby before. I was an only child with an uncle that never had kids and cousins that lived 8 hours away. Yes, Gecko. Shortly after we found out at school, a puppy started to bark softly at my desk. That desk happened to be the last thing my dad and I put together. That's the day he died before we got dinner. Suddenly there was a crash. Something falling in the corner which sent the dog into a state of constant barking. Not just that, I think I heard something bark. Like, waking up in the morning, I saw a box of binder clips on the floor. There's no way that they moved. They were in a different position before I went to bed. They were firmly on the desk, nowhere near an edge. Several years went by and my daughter was about 2, playing in my mom's house on a visit. I was talking to her mom and all of a sudden my daughter poked her head around the kitchen, waved, and said, "Hi, Joey." My mom and girlfriend looked at her and asked, "What did you just say?" She'd never heard the name or any of us talk about my dad before, but here she was saying hi to him. Her response was just saying hi, like innocently without a clue. Later that year, visiting my girlfriend's parents, we slept there one cold New England night. They have a lot of property. They let people keep horses, and that's this one area, and they were penned in. One of the horses had died earlier that day. And late night, our daughter wanted to get into bed with us because the wind was howling. So she gave us each a kiss and said, "Good night, horsey ghost," which sent a chill through me. Again, she didn't see this horse or didn't know that it had died. Hadn't been back to see them since it was winter. The two of us in the darkness, lit only by the moon outside the window, mouthed, "What the fuck?" to each other. This has continued throughout her life, and occasionally asking me for certain things that only had meaning to my dad and stories that he would tell. Using certain words and phrases and playing with toys that she'll occasionally be like talking, apparently, in quotes, to Joey. At 10, I'm starting to wonder if she truly might have taken his place in this world, or just that maybe his consciousness has a connection. She could be a potential empath since she's wildly emotional at times. I don't know. I don't know if I'm even in the right realm there. Maybe it could just be that she has a pure soul and certain things are revealed to her. They are everywhere. I'm not sure if this is just me, but no matter what time, what place, who I'm with, sober or fucked up, the shadow people casually walk around Earth. They're not fully opaque. It's like a fuzzy haze, like in an outline of a person. Imagine a silhouette of energy. First time I started to see them was when I was around 14. I'd go out to my house's shed to smoke cigarettes. I'd see them walk past me. We'd go down the road and they'd just walk around. At the time I called them wanderers, but I think shadow people is a better fit. One time stands out more to me when I was outside smoking weed and cigarettes by myself. I was behind the shed. I turn around to face the shed and I see one of them peering around the corner right into my eyes. There were hands and fingers that were curled around the corner, and in the middle was a clear head. No facial features, but staring right at me. We made eye contact for maybe 10-15 seconds. That's before it just slowly creeps back around the shed out of sight. I've never really had a fear of them at any point, even that last one. Though they would give me a slight spook walking down the road in the dark just to come face to face with one. But letting go of the worry of making too long of a post, I'll tell the one time I actually felt scared of one. I was inside sitting on my couch. I don't entirely remember, but I was probably only high on weed. From my seat, I can see perfectly into this one room. This one room I've always kind of had a spook from, like a dark open closet door at night. But this time I look up to see one, but not like I've ever seen previously. This one was a child, or at least a child height. It wasn't, really particularly translucent like the others. Standing in the doorway, clear as can be. It was a fully opaque silhouette of fuzzy, tense energy with two dark pits where the eyes are supposed to be. Sitting there staring at it, staring at me, and we hold, and probably held our gazes together for about 1 or even 2 minutes. But I swear, it felt like the longest time I've ever been in that seat. As it glares back at me, my whole body's filled with every negative emotion my body can process, and that's apparently a surprisingly large amount. Fear, loathing, wrath, sadness, hopelessness, confusion, everything horrifying and terrifying. Every great tragedy, every great genocide, shooting, and just every general fucked up shit in life. A full, deep, detailed understanding of these rushed through my head down to my torso, then down into my arms and legs. All while looking at what might have been something a little or a whole lot more than a wanderer or shadow person, sitting there scared shitless, slowly walks down my steps, and is gone. Haven't seen it since, but I will say that I am on the border between wanting to and not wanting to encounter again. They're all still everywhere to this day, with no idea what they are or if they're even real in any way, shape, or form. Old Ouija board. This happened several decades ago. A friend got 3 of us using a Ouija board. Thought it was a goofier fake. As it got weirder, I wondered if there might be some kind of unintentional subconscious influence happening. Started harmless, but it got darker. Many spirits became threatening over time. Began to admit to being the same individual. I felt I was being pranked, so I quit. Third friend, not the instigator, seemed weirdly obsessed and wanted to do it more and started doing it alone. Then one night, an outdoor party, the instigator got it out with the obsessed friend. Apparently, they were in for a spooky laugh. There were about 10 teenage boys watching, mocking, and laughing. The spirit eventually identified as the usual negative spirit. He used some new names that many, many years later I saw associated online with demonic entities. But anyway, the spirit got really pissed by the mocking and insulting comments and questions, especially from one loud friend. It also mentioned other people that we knew were talking to it. It was confusing. The loud friend thought that we were messing with him and threatened to destroy the board. The spirit directly threatened him, so I grabbed the board, broke it into 2 pieces. There was a bizarre, sort of a now what pause. Then the group decided that, well, they should burn the board, being the best idea the group could, they're all drunk teenagers could really think of, and at this point, most felt that they were just going along with the joke, but some were actually getting pretty freaked out. So we tried to burn the board. Wouldn't light, had to go 7-Eleven, empty 2 entire containers of charcoal lighter fluid before it finally caught. As it burned, obsessed friend was visibly upset and mumbled that he knew how to make a new one anyways. I asked what the fuck, and he said, it told me how. Days later, we found out a group of kids from the same high school also was on a Ouija board that night. but also mentioned us to them, including that we had made it angry. This was before cell phones and we were at an outdoor party, so nobody knew that the other group in the party was happening that night. 7 more days later, a loud friend who was threatened was in a serious car accident being ejected from a pickup. He did survive. As far as I know, the story ends there. I wasn't aware of anybody using a Ouija board after that. Our first haunting. I was around 17 when this happened, and I was a smoker. But my parents didn't like it when I would smoke in the house, so I'd always go to our pantry that has a tiny window and smoke in there. I often have trouble falling asleep, so I always got up for a smoke between midnight and 3 a.m. So everybody in the house is sleeping. Well, I'm kind of bored, so I'm on my way to smoke, and as soon as I get in front of the pantry door, I just stop. I had this awful feeling in my guts. I just couldn't get in there, even though I was craving a smoke really bad. I go back to bed and make another attempt later, but the same thing happens. For some reason, I think nothing of it, and I just go to bed. Same thing happens next night, but I do get in the pantry and I start smoking. A couple of minutes pass by and I hear a light knock on my pantry door. Thought it was my mom just making sure it was me in the pantry, so I just say, "It's me." I continue smoking my cigarette, and a couple of minutes later I hear 3 louder knocks. I have a bit of a short temper, so I immediately open the door and annoyingly say, "It's me!" I thought it was my mom, but to my shock, nobody was there. Just stand there for a second. Then I close the door and just try to convince myself that it was in fact my mom who somehow disappeared in a second. A minute later, I'm on my way to my room and I see my mom exiting the bathroom. I ask her if she knocked on the pantry door. She just tells me to go to bed because she was half asleep and couldn't be bothered. My family didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy. But in just a few hours, they will think otherwise. That night I went to a birthday party and was sleeping over at a friend's place. When I came back the following morning, my family had a complete change of heart. It was because my brother had a paranormal experience as well. While I was at the party, he was playing League of Legends. He had headphones on because he was talking to his friends. All of a sudden, he felt somebody grab his hoodie. Thought it was me or my mom telling him to keep quiet, but nope, no one was there. So the next day, we just lit the frankincense and did other Eastern European rituals. They worked for a while. I still to this day don't know what that was. May I add that this all happened around a big Christian Orthodox holiday. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences in my house, and they happen from time to time. Sometimes I'd have a paranormal experience like twice in a month. Sometimes it would happen once a year. I'm pretty used to them at this point because thank God none of those experiences were dangerous. Just creepy. Oh, and I live about 100 meters away from a cemetery. There was knocking on the door. My uncle, who worked for a major airline, befriended a couple. The wife was Filipino and the husband was Japanese. They have a young daughter, around 1 or 3 years old, who mostly spoke Japanese, and they lived in a townhouse somewhere in the Philippines. They invited my uncle to visit their house one day, and they invited me to come along with them. So it was my uncle, my 3 cousins, and I that went there for a relatively good amount of time, planned to stay overnight. The date was normal. Went to a mall, took a dip in the pool, and ate good food. We have some language barrier problems since the husband and daughter don't speak Filipino or English, but the wife translated for us, so it really wasn't all a big deal. Their house, as I said, was a townhouse. It was enough to fit their family, but too small with guests like us. They had 3 floors. The first floor was turned into a storage or something, where it's not really suited to be occupied, with a dirty kitchen at the back. The front door of their house was pretty much non-existent. The main entrance to their house was a gate that was around a foot from the door. But other than that, the doorway was wide open. The stairs have 2 doors, one on the bottom, one on the second floor. The second floor was their living room and a small kitchen. This is where we planned to sleep. Then there was the third floor where the family's bedroom was, but their stairs didn't have any door. We settled in for the night on the floor with blankets and pillows. I don't recall what arrangements that we had, but... well, it happened back in 2011, so anyway, we just went to bed, but after some time I was woken up by my cousin, who I'll call Rose. She was the second daughter out of the three, and I know that they were somewhat sensitive to the paranormal since they did something in the past to talk to her best friend who died early. Rose was probably beside me as I was the one that, who she woke up first. She shook me awake and asked me to listen if I heard something. Groggily, I tried to listen for anything, and after a few minutes, I heard knocks on the door. That woke me up fully. She explained that she hasn't gone to sleep and was on the phone. It was past midnight and the knocking on the second floor door started, and that's when she freaked out and woke me up. The knocking was in 4 successions, with at least 2 or 3 seconds in between those 4. Then it would stop, and after a minute or two, it would knock 4 times again. The knocking didn't stop at all since she woke me up, and it wasn't so loud, but it was solid and continuous. It was like a human was programmed to knock that way exactly the same. We were both scared, but didn't move to answer the door or ask who was behind the door, since we both knew nobody could get in and it wasn't downstairs. It wasn't somebody from outside, as there was no main door to the house, and the knocking came from the second door of the staircase. We woke up her older sister and asked her just to listen when she did. She stayed silent for a few seconds, tried to listen, to which the knocks came, but she said that she didn't hear it, went back to sleep pissed off thinking that we were playing with her. We also woke up a younger sister. She told us the same. Rose and I looked at each other in fear. We just tried our hardest to go back to sleep, covering our ears. The only reason why I can't hear it is because I already established that my hearing is also sensitive to these types of experiences rather than seeing entities from a young age. Though I can still see glimpses, but not that clear. In the morning during breakfast, we told everybody what we experienced. The wife told her husband that she thinks it was a mononoke, or yorai, which was monster or spirit in Japanese. It was scarier for them because the number 4, shi, in Japanese, which means death, was considered to be bad, sort of like how the number 13 is to the Western culture. I got deja vu on that story. My music box just played on its own at 4 a.m. I just wanted to post this here since I'm up 30 minutes after this just happened and I don't see myself falling asleep anytime soon. To give some background, my boyfriend gifted me one of those mechanical movement music boxes a while ago. At first we played it pretty often because it was a cute song from a movie that we both adore. But for at least a month now, it's been sitting on a shelf next to my bed unplayed. Recently I've been feeling some weird energy next to my side of the bed. And I am an empath, and I tend to be sensitive to energies. But in all honesty, when it's time to go to sleep, I try to dismiss it because who really wants to have ghost activity? Not me, hard pass. Plus, I love horror films and I binged a series recently. Seemed I freaked myself out with it a little bit. But some nights it's been harder to ignore. I've been scared to get up and use the restroom during the night. And one night I even switched places in bed with my boyfriend because the gaze of it felt so strong. I've had moments where I think I see something in the dark but dismiss it, because it's really just too frightening to acknowledge. My boyfriend even had a bout of sleep paralysis, and when she dreamt that I asked him what was behind me, that was as I faced him in bed. Tonight I struggled again with the fear and anxiety, but I eventually managed to drift in and out of sleep. That was until 4 a.m. That little mechanical movement music box started to play the tune entirely on its own. My boyfriend and I were startled awake, and at first I was disoriented and thought that it was an alarm going off. Anyways, we immediately turned the light on as we were both pretty freaked out. He's been able to go back to bed, but I burned some sage and did a blessing to try to ease my mind. hasn't been particularly effective if I'm writing this now. I looked at the little box and tried to see if there was any way that it could have done what it did on its own. I have no answer. You have to twist the little knob on the bottom twice to even play. I don't know, you guys. I want to be wrong because the idea of something in my home, despite all the protection charms, is really frightening. Hopefully the sun comes out soon so I can feel safe to sleep. My friend saw my ghost. So when I was a junior in high school, I suffered from severe depression. My home life wasn't exactly rainbows and sunshine. It was near the end of October and my school was throwing a homecoming dance. I didn't really want to go, but my friends convinced me. I won't go into great detail, but the night ended horribly. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Fast forward to the next morning. I woke up puffy-eyed and feeling absolutely hopeless. My mom and brother left the store, leaving me home alone. I didn't waste a minute. Went to the medicine cabinet, grabbed all the pill bottles. The last thing I remember, I was pulling up to the ER, my mom trying to get me out of the seat. It all happened so fast. I didn't text my friends I loved them. I didn't indicate in the slightest what I was intending on doing. Nothing. Clearly, my attempt didn't work. I'm writing this now. But while in the hospital, I had a seizure. And this may be important later. After a few days in the psychiatric facility, I was allowed phone calls. So I called my best friend and told her what happened. She was shocked. Rumors were flying around school, per usual at a small private school, that I was pregnant. My mom pulled me out of school or something like that. One guy was joking to a group of people that my two best friends among them that maybe I died. Super funny, I know. My best friend P said that she felt a chill run down her spine as soon as she had said it. She gave him an earful. My other friend A pulled P aside and they started discussing what could have happened. A told P that he thought that he saw me walking down the street a couple of days before, and how he tried to yell to me. The person didn't turn or respond. P said that she had an awful feeling in her gut that something was very wrong. I often forget that this happened because, understandably, I want to pull the past behind me. It was a long time ago. I saw a post of A's earlier today, and I thought how odd it was of somebody as rational and realistic as him to see what he did and feel confident enough to, feel confident enough that it was me to share what he saw with P. Makes me wonder if my soul was an in-between state, just wandering around, or maybe I did die and just switched into a reality where I lived. Spooky stuff. The strangest thing I've experienced to date. My name is Trevor and I live in southern Maine. My whole life I felt connected to something other than what's in front of me. Everywhere I experience small things. Sometimes those things aren't easily explained. My most recent and strange experience happened just last night, the night of October 17th. I moved into a new apartment in June. It's owned by a family friend, so before I moved in I painted the walls and did some other personalization just for fun. The first time I stepped foot into this apartment I felt very uneasy. I'm not sure what it is, but the place just doesn't feel right. Many things have happened while I've been here, but last night was by far the worst. Maine was being hit by a thunderstorm. I had gone to bed expecting to lose power at some point in the night. I woke up around 3:30 a.m. and felt like someone or something was watching me. I had a nightlight near my bed, which was projecting a shadow onto my wall and ceiling. The shadow became bigger and bigger until I felt like whatever was there was right behind me. It started to roll over when the power went out and I could no longer see anything. I don't remember falling back asleep. I woke up for work around 6:15 a.m. per usual, but felt very strange. After getting up and walking to the bathroom, I realized my jaw was very sore. I also had a gash on the inside of my lip that wasn't there before. It's like I'd been punched in the face and my jaw still sore at the same time writing this. I really don't know what this was. I absolutely could have been dreaming. I just want to share this in case anybody else has experienced anything similar. Waking up with cuts and bruises that you didn't have before you went to bed. Hearing, seeing doppelgangers. So I have a sort of a ghost story. It's going to be pretty long because it's two different stories really, but possibly the same entity. These two incidents actually happened, and I to this day have no damn clue what it is that I heard and saw. We've had tons of other occurrences in between, but none so terrifying as these two. Other than one of my kids being hit in their sleep and a handprint being left on them. Anywho, I live in Louisiana. Sort of like the breeding ground for this kind of stuff, right? The block I live on is just wrong. I could go on about it, but I won't. They've joked that it may be on its own little hellmouth. Incident number 1. I'm basically the hood cat lady. I leave food out and toys and even a cute little bed for my little friends. There's one that especially took a liking to me, that I used to just sort of sit outside at night and early morning and just cuddle with for a bit. It was around 2 a.m. as usual as I go to refresh bowls, and I noticed how cold it was. It was in the middle of the summer in Louisiana. My door was shut, so it's not at the AC, and I got this odd feeling. I began hearing whispers. And this voice, I kid you not, was an octave lower than Voldemort's. Look up at me. Stupid me, I look up, and in the backseat of my car, where obviously no one was at 2 a.m., was my son. My 2-year-old son was in the house. Asleep. Only the features were off, as if he was only a bad-drawn memory from somebody who'd only seen him once. The eyes were too narrow, the smile was too wide, and only half of his body was showing. I looked down, finished my task trying to look as calm as possible, noped back into the house, locked, chained the door, salted all the windows and doors. Incident 2. My husband works evening and closing shifts. That brings him home usually after 2 a.m. One night in our room, with my toddler in the bed with me, I began hearing knocking sounds and muffled voices. This is at about 10 p.m. Assuming it's neighbors, I ignored it. As the night went on, knocking sounds began to sound as if they were coming from closets and actually walls, even the ceiling. The voices got closer and they began to sound more male. At 1 a.m. there was a bang at her back door. It's in the bedroom leading to a fenced-in backyard with a chain lock that only husband has the key to, because, it's the hood and we have small kids. The voice I heard was literally my husband. "It's me. Let me in, please, love." His exact tone. Using the name that he calls me. Even my son jumped up yelling, "Daddy's home." Something was off. He never comes to the back door. He calls me or presses the doorbell. Leave a ring. So what the fuck? I almost went to open the door because it sounded so much like him, but instincts just kicked in. Grabbed my son and my phone and noped out of the room to my son's room up front, brought my daughter in his room, and we locked the door. Called my husband, and you guessed it, he was still at work. It could be... I don't think so. Couldn't possibly have been him. When he came home, he looked around and saw no evidence of anybody being there, and no camera footage. No neighbors saw or even heard anything. And that's a lot, because over here everyone's nosy. Everybody knows everyone. A strange face outside of the window. My family has 2 people, me and my mother. My mother is a teacher. She teaches literature in high school. I was still a middle school student at the time. Usually after a stressful day, my mother would go out with her friends. At about 2 a.m., she came home reeking of beer. On the occasion of her wearing nice clothes, she wanted me to take pictures for her. The front of my house is mostly a large glass door with iron bars crossed to make a frame. She modeled in front of that door, and after a while I reviewed what had just been took. Everything seemed so normal, until one picture that I noticed something strange. There's a white streak behind the glass door. It's next to my mother's face. I try to take a closer look, and unmistakable, it's a face. A white face with two black eyes looking straight into the camera in a creepy way. It's so black that it seems to just be an eye socket. Toothless, wide mouth. Everything seems to be twisted in the center of the face. I have a feeling that this is not something that should exist. Like I just saw something I shouldn't have. But it is clearly appearing right in front of my eyes. I started to feel cold. The more I looked, the more scared I became. My mother noticed. Want to see what I just took? I told her there was somebody behind the door. She yelled at me, called me nonsense. But I know my eyes don't deceive me, and of course her reaction confirmed everything. Her face darkened. She immediately sobered up, told me to remember to close and lock the door, turn off all the lights, told me to go to my bedroom. She also immediately entered her room and closed the door. The next day I checked the camera again, and I couldn't find the picture. Maybe she deleted it. Since then, she and I haven't talked about this anymore. It's been behind my mind for so many years. I really want to tell someone. It's probably crazy enough not to believe me, but I know I haven't lost my mind. I know what I've seen. And even my imagination is an element here because she sees it too. My family doesn't worship anything, and I'm not superstitious. Nor do I believe in ghosts. But it was an event that 8 years later I still can't forget. I met an evil ghost. So to give some background information, I'm spiritual. And if you don't know what that is, spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there's something greater than myself. Something more to being human than the sensory experience. Like I believe in souls, spirit guides, and reincarnation. My friend is a medium and can connect with spirit guides, and also ghosts and souls. My friend and I were hanging out at her place, and we had the house to ourselves. We decided to do a session. She was doing a session on me, and I asked normal questions like, what's my future like, and so on, till I asked a question about one of my friends. This friend of mine has some trouble and has been battling depression, anxiety, and some other things. I asked if we could try and connect with the spirit guides and ask what was happening to her. We tried that. Bad idea. My friend who was doing the session had her eyes closed. She was holding my hand. Her face started to twitch in an uncomfy way. I didn't want to disturb her, so I didn't say anything. Suddenly, the room that we were in had this weird vibe. An unwelcoming vibe. Just an unpleasant one. She suddenly stood up from the couch that we were sitting on. She went to grab some incense and lights and started saying, "You're not welcome here. Get out of my house." I've never experienced anything like this. I'm new to all this. Suddenly, this terrible feeling came rushing to me. I don't know how to describe it. I think anybody that met a ghost or soul knows what I'm talking about. The best way I can put it is trapped. I felt trapped. No matter where I went in the room, I felt trapped and small, like I was something's prey, like I was being watched. Thankfully, my friend got this ghost and soul out of the house, and we sat down to talk about what just happened. My friend told me that this is what is called a clinging spirit. It's a spirit that feeds on negativity and sadness, or in my friend's case, her depression and anxiety. My friend told me what she saw afterward. To understand this, you need to understand the floor plan, though. So right as you enter the house, there's a staircase that goes upstairs. On the right is the kitchen. On the left is the living room. That's where we were. Neither of these rooms has doors. It's just the wall and the hole in it. The living room couch is on the opposite end of the entryway, so you have a full view from there. My friend said in the doorway that she saw this tall and skinny black goo. It had no face, but it had the shape of a woman's body. The moment it appeared in the doorway, it started screaming at my friend like a very loud, painful screaming, a horror movie scream. The moment she opened her eyes, the ghost wasn't there, but the feeling of its presence was. That's also what I felt. And after all this happened, we called my friend's mom and sister and we slept in the guest room. We were just too afraid to go upstairs to my friend's bedroom, and we were 15 when this happened. That sounds fair. House haunting. This happened some time ago in the early 2000s. It's not made up. I really experienced these events, even if they sound crazy. My parents were in a rough patch, and my dad moved out of the house. I was in high school at the time, and started out one night my mom and I were watching TV. It sounded like scratching noises and heavy dragging noises in the attic. We immediately assumed raccoons. I don't remember the timeline exactly, but we kept hearing this noise, and each time, maybe a few weeks later or a few nights later, the noise slowly crossed from one end of the attic all the way to the other end of the house. My mom did have a company come check for animals, but they didn't find any. Then the real scary stuff started. I was asleep one night and woke up to a figure next to my bed. Best description is a shadow person. I slowly grabbed my blanket and covered myself up with just a peephole to watch it. It was entirely black, even darker than the dark room around it. It looked like the darkness was slowly steaming off of it. I was both amazed and terrified. I watched it for what felt like hours until it slowly backed out of my room. I was afraid to leave my bed eventually. I fell asleep though. The next morning at breakfast, my mom said that she saw something standing at the foot of her bed. Then I told her what I had seen. There was a heaviness in the house after that. Other times, I remember waking up at night and hearing voices and whispering. Sometimes I could hear music playing, like it was an old theater or something. When I peeked outside my room, the noises would cease. One night, the dresser drawer at the foot of my bed slammed open and shut. Another night, Mom started screaming in the middle of the night, and I grabbed my baseball bat and ran into her room. Just outside of her bedroom door was a chair. I swear I saw this shadow figure sitting in it as I ran in. She told me somebody had laid down on the bed next to her. As the events and encounters progressively got more frightening, we were afraid to stay in the house, especially at night. I would sleep with all the lights on if I could sleep at all. I started spending the night in a hotel. Even in the daytime, you would hear things like somebody calling her name. I can't remember how long the haunting lasted. Guessing at least 3 or 4 months had passed, and my mother was tired of being afraid in her own house. She had the house blessed. Sometime in the next few days, my mom was heating up a cup of water for tea in the microwave. It exploded inside. I asked her how long she'd put the microwave, and then boom, these loud scratching sounds ran down the wall around, and a dark mist filled the house. The voices and whispers all around us just grabbed each other, and just in horror. All these sounds are happening simultaneously. Then this very deep and natural voice began talking over all the other noise. It was deep and unnatural. Some sort of language I'd never heard anything like it. Not even to this day could I imagine what that was. As my mother and I stood there and we looked down the hall toward the voice, something was there, like a fucking horror movie. It was quadrupedal, made of darkness, like drawing a Sharpie in the air. It had what looked like several rows of spines down its back, and then my mother started to pray, and so did I. The creature slowly backed down the hall and into the bedroom, and slowly, all the noises and voices faded away. The mist and haze seemed to follow it down the hallway. That was until everything returned to normal. Never saw or experienced anything again in that house. If anybody was curious, yep, when friends came over, they would have experiences also. I've had other experiences since then, but nothing like back then. My friend came back to tell me he's okay. I'm sure a lot of you reading this can relate to losing someone. I've definitely endured quite a lot of loss throughout my life, although this specific one hit harder than once before and has taken a while to come to terms with. In 2019, I received a phone call late in the night from a close friend. Levi wasn't the type to call, he was more of a texter. So when I saw his name flashing on my cell phone at 2 a.m., I knew it couldn't be good. Picked up the phone, walked out of my bedroom, went to the next room to take the call. I was told within the first 20 seconds of the call that there had been an accident. Her friend Tyler was gone. I went from half asleep to wide awake in a split second. Gone? What the fuck does that even mean, Levi? I got shitty, I got pissed because I didn't believe him. It wasn't until he told me again that Tyler was gone. There was an accident when he was driving, that he was dead. He told me himself and a few others of our friend group. They were all at his house and told me I could come over if I wanted to. After we got off the phone, I fell to the floor. I was in complete shock and complete disbelief. There's no way this is happening. This isn't real. A few moments later, I went back into my bedroom, picked up my 4-month-old sleeping son, walked downstairs, sat in our recliner, and just bawled my eyes out for hours. Tyler had been texting me that night. He asked me what I was up to around 9 or 10. Myself and my girlfriend were just on the couch playing Overcooked on the Switch. I'd asked him the same about what he was doing. He responded that he was drunk, and I assumed that no one was at his house or another person's. He was a very social dude and loved to be out and about drinking with people. He was loved by many and had a friend to all. I had removed myself mostly from that lifestyle because of getting into a serious relationship and having my first kid. I'd fallen asleep when we were messaging back and forth, and his last message read, "You winning?" I never thought to ask where he was or if he needed a ride. He wrecked his truck on the way home from the bar that night. Just an hour or so after that last message was sent to my phone, the guilt of not asking him if he was okay, if he needed a ride or anything, just assuming he was good. That guilt took over my life and consumed me to the point where I was now drinking heavily myself on a regular basis. Whiskey every single night, blacking out to numb in pain and guilt. Almost lost my job, stopped taking care of myself, and most importantly, I stopped being a good partner and father. My girlfriend at one point had her car parked with all of her belongings and my son's, telling me to say goodbye to him as I was pretty much wasted. I was sitting in my garage, and somehow I was fortunate enough that she ended up staying, and I slowly got my shit together. Fast forward a few years later. Throughout this time, I'd occasionally talk to Tyler. Whether that be in my head silently or even out loud at times when I was alone, asking him, please tell me you're okay. Somehow find a way, please. I had to come to terms with his death, but I didn't have that closure and reassurance still, if that makes sense. I had a few dreams where I thought he was there, but it felt cloudy and I would forget him. A few months back, I had another dream. One so real and so vivid about him. And this is strange and hard to explain, but we're all giant nerds coupled with heavy levels of sarcasm within my friend group. Pretty stupid and childish, immature, sarcastic humor is the norm. So when my dream started off with me and Tyler walking to a bathroom together and then both walking up to a toilet and seeing a huge turd, and we both started yelling, poop, and dying laughing. Weird, I know, but it was just, it's just us. Then all of a sudden, the back of the wall behind the toilet opened up like a door. The bathroom completely disappeared in front of us. The most amazingly beautiful scenery lay before me. Huge mountains, lush green grass, and gorgeous blue sky. Picture that first time in Breath of the Wild, when Link walks up to the edge of the mountain and you get that first look at how beautiful that world was. Tyler turned to me and didn't say a word, but just looked at me. I knew instantly, without him even speaking, that he had to go back into the place, and I couldn't follow him. You don't have to go, man. Please don't. Stay here a little longer. I was pleading with him. He still said nothing, just smiled and walked into the world and kept eye contact with me as the door closed back. The dream immediately faded to black and I woke up. Tyler was 27 when he left us. He was a great friend. We spent so much time together over the years, good times far outweighing the bad. I could spend hours telling stories about the stupid shit that we got into and somehow got out of. This is the first time I've told this story, and I know it's long-winded, but after reading some other stories on here about similar experiences, I thought this would be the best time to share mine, get it off my chest too. I believe he visited me that last time to tell me he was okay. Tyler, I love you, man. Miss you every single fucking day. Can't wait till we meet again, my friend. Man with a painted white face came into my room. Last year, 2021, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I was sleeping by my girlfriend in her apartment. It was probably 3, maybe 4 a.m. I got up to use the restroom. Kinda had a hard time going back to sleep. So maybe 5 minutes or so after getting back into bed, I was lying on my back with my head facing left toward the wall. I had my left arm raised over my head, hanging off the edge of the bed. My girlfriend was sleeping with her back facing me, and her arm was on her stomach. It was dead silent. My girlfriend had a little loud dog who barks at everyone that walks by the front door. I didn't hear no footsteps, no voice, no form or movement. And all of a sudden I feel somebody grab my left hand that's hanging off the bed. At first I thought it was my girlfriend. I didn't think much at first, until I realized that my left hand's on the opposite side. I opened my eyes, but I could only see from my right eye because my left eye is blocked by my arm. Without turning my head, I saw a man through a mirror on the wall. His face was painted white, pasty white. He had shoulder-length hair that was curly and a light, dirty brown-colored hair. I could only see what the nightlight in the room illuminated. It was definitely a white man with a very strong build body type. He had no clothes on from what I could tell. He was holding something in his right hand. It was like a stick with something bushy at the end of it, and it was like hovering above my stomach. Man, I thought somebody broke into the apartment or something, I don't know, but still no noise at all. No movement, and the grip of his hand wasn't hard at all. I was looking at him for a good, 10 seconds. I finally worked up the courage to turn my head and get a visual of this man, but he vanished. When I looked back the other way, the mirror I saw him through vanished as well. I woke up with my girlfriend immediately and told her what happened. I don't know if this has anything to do with what happened, but I'm Native American, and when I told my tradition, when I told my tradition relatives about it, they gave me a possible answer to what I saw. I live in the heart of a city in Arizona. If you guys have any questions, I'll try my best to answer. Sorry if I have this formatted annoyingly. This is my first post. I've only told a few people about this. In 1998 I drowned, but I was saved by an angel. I was on vacation at the Edgewater Hotel in Gatlinburg, Tennessee with my family. We were in the hot tub, which was indoors. In this indoor area, we also had a swimming pool. Hotel rooms lined up next to the pool. The parents needed to go to our hotel room for some reason, which is about a 15-second walk away. They left me alone in the hot tub. I was the only one there in the entire pool area. I was enjoying the hot tub and decided to walk around in it. As I was walking toward the middle of the hot tub, my feet slipped from underneath me. I discovered it was much deeper than I thought. I sank to the bottom of it, and for some reason I couldn't gain any footing. I remember panicking and flailing, trying to reach the surface, and my feet just kept slipping at the bottom. I very quickly reached the point where I couldn't hold my breath any longer. And this may sound kind of crazy, but I vividly remember breathing in water at this point. And as I inhaled water, not swallowed, but actually inhaled like a half breath worth of water, I I still remember the sensation of water entering my lungs, but there was no pain. I then had the realization that I was going to die, and in that moment I felt a hand grab mine and pull me out of the water. When I looked up, there was an old man smiling at me. I looked at him in shock for several seconds, speechless, before saying, "Thank you." He continued smiling and never said a word. I then ran to the hotel where I found my parents arguing about something. Tried to tell them what just happened, but they wouldn't even let me speak. Then I ran back out trying to find the man who saved me, and I couldn't find him. I even went to the reception area and asked if they had seen an old man pass by. Nobody said they'd seen him. I realized at this point that it was an angel that saved me. How my 6-year-old brain knew this, I don't know. But I still have no doubt that it was truly an angel, and not a person who saved me. And it seems my gecko agrees. My sister has a connection with the dead. Ever since I was 12, I'm 23 now, I can remember my sister having a lot of nightmares and talking in her sleep. My sister's room was only accessible through my room. Me and my family always thought that my sister always acted weird the morning after she had those dreams. She would also talk to my mother about the nightmares, describing the people that she saw as all dressed in white and all moving away from her. I should also mention that we come from Egypt, and my family's Muslim. My family's superstitious, and they believe in Islamic afterlife, like grave questions. They believe in Islamic afterlife, grave questions. You heard that right. And to give you a little bit about the questions, 2 dreadfully looking angels ask you 3 questions. 1. Who is your Lord? Allah. 2. What is your religion? Islam. 3. Who is your prophet? Muhammad. Your answers are based on only your faith and good doings in life. It's not based on personal knowledge. If you answer correct, you're entitled to a good life in heaven. And if you answer wrong, you're going to hell, and your punishment starts in the grave. You can read more about this by Googling Munkar and Nakir. Get to my story now, folks. Sorry for spending so much time on this. So basically, I recently moved out with my apartment 3 weeks ago. That's where I was living with my mother and sister in a 1-bedroom apartment. A week ago, my uncle, who was in Egypt, died. The same night that my uncle died, at around 10:30 p.m., my mom was sitting on the couch in the living room when her phone rang. It was my dad, who doesn't live with them, calling my mom to tell her that my uncle had died. At that same exact moment, my sister was sleeping in the bedroom, walks out, stares at my mom, and says, "Did Uncle Shady die?" My mom looks at her in shock and says, "Yes." Shady's not my uncle's real name. My sister then turned around and walked back to her room and fell asleep. My mom was so shocked that she went to my sister, woke her up, and asked her how she did. Or rather, how she knew, I guess. My sister told my mom, and she had a dream where my uncle was sitting in his grave trying to talk to my sister about the secrets of death, listing some of the bad things that he had done in his life. Didn't have time to repent for, and now he's being tortured in his grave. He's trying to repent, but he can't. And then his bad doings outweigh his good doings in life. He made my sister swear in a book that she thinks the Quran is to never tell anybody those things in detail. By that time, my sister and my mom had moved to the living room to relax a big. Have some tea. They went into the living room to, relax a bit, I'm sure. When my sister got up to go back to the room, she started screaming. That's when she looked into the room. She told my mom that it was an apparition of my uncle in the room. My mom told her that it was my uncle reminding her of the pact that they'd made. Okay, I should mention that we haven't talked to my uncle or any of my dad's family in over 10 years. We moved to the USA in 2010. Haven't talked to them since. We also don't have good relationships that we have with them, like hated my mother and we had bad blood with them. This is not my sister's first encounter with the paranormal or the first time that she had dreams of dead family members telling her secrets or stories. It's just the most recent. I just came back this weekend to visit them. I'm really confused and quite flustered by my sister's weird connection, and honestly a little bit scared of that connection. I also have a hard time believing this, considering I don't believe in any of it. But to hear it from my sister is quite scary. My first possible haunting experience in a psychiatric ward. I work as a nurse in a psychiatric unit. It's conveniently tucked away around the back of an old hospital. I'm on night shift. Most of the night is spent trying to convince maniac patients to return to their bed. Excuse me, manic. We were having a strangely quiet night. The staff usually sit in the corridor at the intersection between the male and female sides of the ward. We hear everything that's going on better from there, and we can intervene quicker if need be. There's a shower room located just to the left of where we sit. It has a toilet and short wall partition that separates the shower from the far corner of the room. As we were sitting there, the door to the shower room just slowly crept open. No big deal, we got up, closed it again, and went on with the night. It happened again for about an hour later, and again we thought nothing of it. After closing the door a second time, though, we soon heard the sound of water running. Got up to check, found the tap in the shower room was running too. Thought it must have been faulty, but when I tried to turn it off, it spun easily and stopped running water. Feeling a little bit freaked out now, I checked around. Wanted to see around the shower, just in case a patient was somehow hiding there. But there was no one. When I turned to walk back out, I felt a sudden chill on my back and my neck. Heard the sound of gas hissing behind me. I glanced back around to check the shower, which seemed to work fine, and just assumed there was like trapped air or something. The next night we were sitting in the same place, and again, it was unusually quiet. That was until 2 a.m. That's when we heard a massive bang, then a dull thud, as if something had hit against the wall and then slid to the floor. The noise seemed to be quite close, and we hurriedly looked through each dormitory and individual patient's room. We were expecting that one of the patients had fallen, but everything was still sound asleep, apart from one patient who told us that she had trouble sleeping the last few nights. We continued with our search, but we couldn't seem to find anything to explain the sound. We sat back down in the corridor where we started to talk about ghosts and just joking about being haunted. The patient who couldn't sleep asked if they could smoke in the toilet. We occasionally let people do this at night, and they weren't really allowed to let them out of the unit after 10 p.m. Trying to tell an avid smoker they can't have a cigarette is a sure way to start a fight. We said that she could have a quick one in the shower room before going back to bed. Asked one of us if they could come with her. When we asked why, she explained, "Because that room freaks me out. There's spirits in there that are trying to come through the mirrors." We heard stuff like this from patients on a regular basis. We didn't really think much of it. Offered her some reassurance and, well, agreed to come into the bathroom with her. While we were in there, she talked about seeing the ghost of a man in her room, which kept her up at night. She then stopped talking abruptly and looked confused before going over to peer around the partition. Asked her what was wrong, and she shushed me. Asked in a whisper if I heard what she heard. I admitted I couldn't hear anything. Again, it's a common occurrence for people to talk about auditory hallucinations in our ward. I asked her what she could hear. She said that she thought she could hear like a dripping sound. There was no water coming, certainly no water running. When she checked behind the partition, she heard a hissing sound. I suggested that she finish her cigarette and get back to bed. She asked for some medication to calm her down and then said, "Man, I hate that bathroom. The door opens and closes itself, you know?" And after she went to bed, I was telling the other staff about this, and we were joking about how much of a freaky coincidence it all was. We were still discussing it, and that's when the staff came in. When the first nurse arrived, she came over to ask how the shift was, and asked her if she believed in ghosts in sort of a joking way. She said that she didn't, but she had bad memories of the ward that sometimes freaked her out. She told us the worst thing she ever saw was 20 years ago when she was doing the hourly checks on the ward once, just to check on each patient every hour to check that they're okay. She couldn't find one patient, went to the shower room because she could hear water running. She checked around the partition and found the guy lying dead in a pool of blood in the shower. He'd hacked himself to death with 2 blades, an obviously very unwell man. The nurse told us that ever since that happened, a few times she's gone into the shower room and felt a sudden rush of cold air, as if somebody was trying to rush past her. Might have started looking for a new job. My second possible paranormal experience in a psychiatric ward. So for a bit of background, I'm a psychiatric nurse working in an older unit of a bigger hospital. I'm pretty well distanced from the main hospital building. There's not much around us apart from a car park, some trees, and an admin building. That's just down the road. I was on night shift when this happened, and there's usually skeleton staff on an overnight. 2 trained nurses, 3 or 4 nursing assistants. We had a patient with an eating disorder at a ward, and this time she was required constant observation to make sure she wasn't micro-exercising or purging. At night, we usually waited until she'd fallen asleep, and then positioned a member of staff just outside the dormitory that she shared with 3 other patients so that the patient had a little more privacy to sleep through the night. Our ward's in a T-shape with a male corridor and a female corridor at either end. The nursing station's at the center. We all sat at the center of the T-junction so we could see and hear down each of the corridors. We had one member of the staff, and they were sat outside the female dormitory at the end of the female corridor. The chair the staff member sat on had its back to the fire door at the end of the corridor, facing along towards us. We all took turns sitting there over the night. It was a fairly quiet night with all the patients. They were just sleeping soundly. It was a rarity in most cases. We usually had whispered conversations in the corridor amongst each other to keep us going, and on one occasion I was sitting on the observation, just chatting with a colleague. That's when she looked up behind me confused. I asked her what was up, and she said that she thought she saw something moving on the other side of the fire door. There was a small round window in the door looking out at the trees and the path leading around to the bins at the back of the unit. I told her to stop creeping me out and we'd laugh about it. We were talking about last night, and that's when all this stuff was happening when she looked up startled. She said she was positive something moved past the glass. She dared me to get up and look outside. I was in the middle of a not-so-polite decline at this request when I heard a thud at the fire door behind me. It had just been kicked. We froze and we exchanged a look of horror. Just there was a very gentle knock at the door. Needless to say, we both freaked. I jumped out of my chair and we both came hurrying towards me. Both of us full of nervous giggles. It took some persuasion for both of us to get up before we managed to go and look around the window. There's nothing there. The night went on and we continued to joke and speculate about what we saw and heard. She brought a chair up to sit next to me outside the dormitory for emotional support. I insisted that I wasn't going to look out that window for the rest of that night. Well, a few hours later, somebody else sat on the observation, and I was chatting in the middle of the junction with another nurse. One of our colleagues steps out of the office at the junction, looks up the corridor, and gasps. She pointed at the fire door. She said she was sure she just saw a pale face staring through the window before it vanished. A new round of speculation started as we theorized as to what it could have been. That's when the door to the female dormitory burst open. A patient came stumbling out of the corridor, running past the nursing assistant in the observation and straight down the corridor at us. She looked terrified and half asleep. We assumed that she was sleepwalking. We caught her as she reached at the junction and began attempting to soothe her. She kept trying to push past her hands, muttering in a scared voice, "No, there's something there, there's something there, there's something there." I tried to engage with her, but she was either too deep in sleep or too groggy. Eventually we managed to calm her and escort her back to the dormitory. When she got to her bed, she stopped again, asked if the nurse had to stand over all of her, asked if the nurse had to stand over her all night. We assured nobody was standing over her all night, and she looked confused, but allowed us to settle her into bed where she probably just fell asleep. Our adrenaline was running high by this point, and matters weren't really helped when the haunted tap started playing up again, turning itself on in the cursed bathroom. We were so freaked out one of the nurses refused to walk about the ward on her own, while others remained skeptical about it all. It was maybe a week later when we were back on shift. We had the same setup, but one member of the staff sat alone at the observation and the rest of us in the middle of the corridor. That's when a nursing assistant who hadn't been there the first night stepped out of the office behind us and shouted, "Who the fuck is that?" She was loud enough to make all of us jump up and look down the corridor. She was pointing at the fire door, and the poor, pale, freaked-out staff member sat in front of it. The nursing assistant then explained that she had stepped out of the office, and then she glanced at the fire door, and then she saw something white shining in. When she did a double take, she realized it was a pale face of a blonde woman pressed up against the window. The nursing assistant said that she shouted and the face dropped down as if the person or whatever it was had fallen. We all went together to peer out. Of course, there's nothing there. I called the site manager. There's always one manager on call at night to handle any big issues. Suggested that there might have been a person going around the building and looked through the windows. She didn't seem all that concerned with the story and just suggested no staff leave the building until morning, which is typically a rule anyways. Of course, a paranormal encounter isn't the only explanation for this. A living, breathing person going around staring through her windows was creepy enough, especially since that fire door didn't have a lock and was often blown open by the wind. Another week or so passed and different staff rotated on shift. I told one of the nurses all the stories of what had happened to us on shift, and she was petrified, saying that she always got an eerie feeling on the ward at night. Later that night, a member of the staff from another ward on the unit popped in to borrow something. He'd worked at the hospital for almost 30 years. He had been in every ward in the unit at some point. The nurse I was working told him with was freaked out, asked if he'd experienced any hauntings in the ward. He seemed amused and asked, "Like what?" She told him about the tap turning on and off and the patient claiming there were spirits in the mirrors. He seemed skeptical and sort of just shrugged it off, but he did agree that it was a new one to him. He then said that he'd never had any haunting or weird experiences in the ward, but said that a lot of staff through the years had complained about spooky stuff happening at the female dormitory. Again, I'm not necessarily claiming this has to be down to ghosts or anything. His experience definitely wasn't as paranormal feeling as my last post, but it was definitely an uneasy night for us, to say the least. And to all of you guys out there, I hope you're having a easy night. See ya.